Good evening. This is the Town of Fairfield's Affordable Housing Committee meeting of July 13th. We're meeting in the second floor conference room of the old Town Hall building. It's now 7 p.m. and we're also meeting via Zoom. We have a quorum this evening. This is Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. We have with us Chairman Rathwall, Commissioner Boulabase, Commissioner Velez, and Commissioner Limecooler, as well as our recording secretary, Gretchen Gerstner. With that, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this nice July evening. Giving up some time in the backyard or at the beach. I appreciate that. Thank you. Our first item today is approval of the minutes. The agenda says minutes from May 11th and June 8th. I only have the June 8th.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I must have gone from the prior one. I think we only need to approve the June 8th one. If we do need the 11th, I'll go back and look.
Yeah.
On for next meeting.
Yeah, so if I could get a motion to approve the June 8th minutes.
Make a motion to approve the June 8th minutes.
You second?
Second.
Yeah.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? The minutes are approved. And Mark, let me ask you, part of the minutes were a list of our findings on 15 Umpqua.
I just included that because that was discussed at the meeting, so
Yeah.
I did it more as a handout because that was provided.
Yeah.
So
But did we get any response from TPC?
What I heard from staff,
Yeah.
from the commission via staff, that they appreciated the comments. I also heard from the applicant or attorney that they found the comments reasonable. They will revision to their affordability.
It's a little out of the agenda order, but is there anything to talk about how it's going, 15 Umpqua?
Well, we're on the third hearing night. They've continued it to the 26th. We haven't made a lot of progress. There's still, I think they just barely touched on the last meeting, the traffic report. Covered a lot in terms of infrastructure concerns. But, you know, obviously, the 26th of this month, and based on the progress they made, I'm not sure it will be completed on, I'm not confident it'll be completed on the 26th. So we'll have to wait and see.
Can you guesstimate, are we gonna get stuck with something that doesn't look good down there, or is?
Well, I think, you know, if I had to bet, I think it's likely gonna end up in court one way or the other.
I think so.
You know, if it proves, I think there'll be an appeal taken by somebody. There's actually been an intervention filed, so there is at least a formal intervener. And if it were denied, I'm suspect the developer or the applicant will take it. So, you know, I've reached out to the applicant directly and indicated, you know, our concerns informally, and that we're still be willing to talk about something that would be more neighborhood, the character of that neighborhood, and smaller in scope, and preserving, you know, first floor. So, you know, I do think, I'm an optimist by nature, so I still think there's an opportunity to work something out that, you know, would be appropriate. I mean, part of it is aesthetics, the design of the building. Well, you know, if we make a few changes, you know, I think it will improve the visual appeal immeasurably, you know. So, and they may not cost a lot of money, but part of it is just, it's massive. And there are techniques that an architect can do to break up the massing of the building, both in terms of using materials and structurals and providing breaks in the development in some fashion. So we had suggested, actually provided photographs of other developments that I've seen elsewhere to help guide that conversation, but, you know, we're not there yet. So clearly, both sides are kind of like, well, we're gonna get this out, so.
The people next door, it's not Sacred Heart, but who's the partner?
Michelle,
Yeah, if, no, with the theater. Who owns that?
Cleveland.
Cleveland. They'd be good people who,
Well, you know.
We could make a marriage.
When there was initial conversation about developing the site, we suggested one or both. It would be natural partners, potentially, there'd be interest, they have development expertise. So we had suggested either working with, Cleveland or Fischel. I actually suggested a few other developers that, you know, have a solid reputation in terms of doing either this type of mixed-use development or higher density residential, but, you know, in keeping with the scale that we're talking about here, not, so, I still think there's an opportunity to, say, preserve first floor commercial space, do something nice, active, that would be a appropriate legacy for the owns the property, his family, still, you know, make money, obviously, altruistically, so.
Who owns the property currently?
It's, you know, so it's owned by Dr. Lee Forrest. He's,
So is he the
he owns it.
person who's wanting to develop it?
Yeah, and it's been in his family. It was Frank Salm, who owned the property for many years, and Forrest is related to him. Passed away a number of years ago. You know, so I know that development is not something he has done.
Right.
And, John Geddes is certainly a development architect, but, you know, and I think we could make some improvements in the design. Oh, a lot. So,
it's the most prominent corner in the town.
Yeah.
it is, and we've met with him a couple times, and with John Geddes, and emphasized that point. You know, so his original proposal was a mixed-use development around 40 units, and it wasn't horrible, but again, you know, there was design-wise, visual appearance-wise, it could be improved upon. So, and there needed to be some adjustment in terms of our zoning, allow him to even do that. So we were talking about ways in which we could bridge the gap, but then, you know, set aside. And, you know, I think part of it is, I think this might be a more expeditious path to getting an approval, and then maybe not, you know, it's not an easy process regardless, so it'd be better if we can come up with something that compromise, neighbors could support, the town could support, obviously, realize the return on his. Again, it is a really prominent location downtown. It's certainly, we could use some additional residential downtown. That's helpful, but the design right, they take into account, we've got some infrastructure challenges. Those are gonna cost money, so.
Okay, more to come, fingers crossed.
Nina, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I mean, we go in and out, but yes, I can hear you. Has he been open to like you talking to him about the developments and things like that? Have they
On her side or our side?
I think we lost you. You're probably on the train side.
Yeah,
We'll do our best.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Maybe
There
you
she
can
is.
text- Dina, if you can hear me, maybe you could, if we're losing you, you can text me and I can read your text.
that'd be cool, or put it in the chat, yeah,
Yeah.
either way.
Thank you for that, yes. Okay, so let's move on. Update on the plan of conservation and development.
So, we did, I did put an item on the agenda. I think we're gonna have to push this over till our August, September meeting. I think what we had, talked about was inviting, either Jim Wen or Emmeline Harrigan or both, from the planning and zoning staff to join us just to provide an update on where things stand with the plan of conservation and development.
I'm
Got the
giving her
text?
1 second. I'm sorry. Nina wants to know if they've been open to our suggestions.
Yes and no. So I think at this point, we're in the middle of a hearing. So when he called back, we had just started the hearing process, or I don't even know if it had actually gone to the first night of hearing. And I said at that point, just wanted to convey to him that we were open to having a conversation about coming up with an appropriate scale development for the site. And we're open to having that conversation, but at this point, we kind of have to let the process play itself out. So I do expect at some point we're gonna end up in court, which again provides an opportunity for both sides to kind of talk through those things. But, yeah, he's been somewhat responsive. I don't know, always if they hear what you're saying and apply it in practice, but sometimes I think the architect has one idea of what he wants to do, and you send him visual, look at, these type of developments for some things that we'd like, and they're pulling out the wrong thing. They get the wrong message, so it's just kind of funny, but I think that ultimately, I think there's an opportunity here. I guess that's how I would leave it.
Okay,
So on the plan of conservation development, I hadn't had a chance to really, and I know they just had, a planning and zoning meeting, earlier this week, so I didn't have a chance to get Jim or Emmeline to tonight's meeting. I am supposed to, participate in a call with them and the consultant, this week. So I will have a better understanding of what their timetable is and what they're looking to accomplish. But I do know, that housing and economic development are two of the key areas that they want to address as part of the plan of conservation development. And, given the fact, that we had a lot of participation from the Planning and Zoning Commission crafting the affordable housing plan, a fair amount, but was pretty high level too in terms of, we talked to concepts, we didn't get into the nitty gritty of how to actually do some of these things. We haven't done a comprehensive update to our zoning regulations, and there's really an opportunity here to rewrite.
that'd take time.
It's gonna take time, but, I think Rome wasn't built in a day, so we have to just start somewhere.
Mhm.
I just, we've talked about, we just had a meeting today with another property owner who was looking, what can I do with my site? And reality is, under the existing zoning, there are, a lot of limitations, to doing redevelopment, such that it almost, if you're doing something, and the idea when you redevelop a site that you own is you have to end up, you're replacing what you have. You have to, be able to cover your costs and then some, and then
Right.
make a reasonable return in order to justify the
Right.
risk, right? So
Right.
they're not gonna just eliminate what they have and put back something with just a modest change. So it has to be something a little bit more than that. And the end of the day, you know, it seems like the way we've structured this, it almost forces a lot of these guys to look at things as aggressive as 830G, and that shouldn't be. I mean, we should have some reasonable alternatives, things that we could live with, that would give people an opportunity to do something meaningful with the site that they own, the property they own, but not force them into crazy land where they're doing something really aggressive. So I think, again, devil's in the details. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about the actual specifics. We have, like, amend our DRD overlay zone, and here's a couple ideas, but we need to flush out those ideas. Look at the residents being, well, how can we do small scale, you know, 2 to 4 unit development? But again, that parking conversation we had at the hearing was, I think, you know, there's opportunities for us to do that, but it will take.
So the update of the plan, we're gonna talk about in a few minutes. I'll wait for that.
I was gonna say that there was a June 2nd meeting between the commission and the consultant.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find it in recordings. I think it's all from.
The one where the Zoom thing didn't work, or?
I think that must have been the one. And, but I did think it was interesting that, the consultant said that they wanted to meet with the Affordable Housing Committee. And they also, expressed interest and some current expertise in the concept of land management, land purchases, swaps, and so forth. So, hopefully that comes up in the conversation, Mark, that you have with,
Who's the consultant?
It's FHI, Fitzgerald Holiday,
You know,
and they've done work for the town in the past.
But
We've been impressed with
we
their work.
can't reach out to them, they're a consultant to TPD.
Well, we should work through planning and zoning
Yeah.
and the staff there.
But I think Herb is right, that we should have a conversation with them, and especially if they've got information, ideas that we could use.
Yeah, I'm hoping when I've been invited to take part in the next staff conversation, so I'll get a better sense as to how we can, you know, one of the questions I always ask is, how can we help you? You know, how can,
Yeah. What was the firm's name again?
Paul's name?
Yeah.
FHI.
they did the Black
Fitzgerald
Rock,
Holiday.
they did the Black Rock
Yep.
study. Black
Sure.
Rock Turnpike?
Yeah,
Yes, they have a transportation planning side, and these guys are just. But, yeah, we've been very impressed with, their work in the past.
okay, good. Anything else on the P O C D? If not, we can move on to election of officers.
Yeah, I included this because we talked about it last time, and I did reach out to, the RTM, member, Jeff Steele and Pam Iacona, who are like, Robert's Rules experts, and I said, you know, because, we've been looking at creating an arts commission in town, and, Pam had, Iacona, Representative Iacona, contacted me and said, well, you don't need per Robert's Rules, you don't need a chair and vice chair, you do need a chair and secretary. Show me where that is, so she did, she sent it to me. It's really up to you, it's not, I don't know if anyone's really gonna, obviously, we've had chair and vice chair before, and no one said move.
Maybe we can table that since,
Yeah.
We don't have, we've had
right,
4
yeah,
people here.
Yeah, but let me just also mention that, I reached out to Betsy Brown,
right.
and she said basically exactly what Mark had just said, that, we need a chair, and that we should have a secretary, because secretary typically signs the motions, you know, that when, if, not the motions, if
Yeah.
we pass something.
The minute of,
But, you know,
Yeah.
this is, you know, we're not like the,
Yeah.
zoning board of appeals or
Yeah.
zoning, where we're actually issuing decisions,
Yeah.
you know, they're going in.
I wish we had a need for something like a treasurer, if that we had somebody.
We'll just have to satisfy yourself with myself.
Yeah.
For us to get stuff done, right?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right, yeah.
But we can
Yeah.
just keep it on the agenda for another.
And it should be when there's more folks here, you know. Okay. The affordable housing plan, and next steps. I didn't recirculate, I don't believe, my one-page summary of, what the, 2022 Affordable Housing Plan update contained. I do want to state that the overall goals were, number one, obtain a 4-year moratorium, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and number two, provide a broadened range of housing options and potential locations to address growing housing needs. So the Tier 1 strategies, Mark had mentioned one, the changes to the design residential district, which was number two. The number one strategy was increasing the affordability set-aside requirements, perhaps to 15% or higher. And let me just ask about that. Has there been any discussions with Jim or?
Yeah, in fact, in our conversation today with somebody who was looking to do something on a piece of property and trying to incorporate mixed use and higher density residential on the site, you know, they asked about affordability set-aside requirements. 10%, 12% in the TOD overlay, but we're looking to increase that. In my conversations with several other developers that have TOD plans or TOD, you know, development applications, we've talked about, you know, 15 requirements. So it's not, it won't be a complete surprise. I think there probably is a little bit more work to be done to kind of understand the numbers and what the impact would be, to make sure that, you know, last thing we want to do is by creating a high threshold or bar or burden, push somebody into a different path that we don't necessarily want. So, you know, I think we need to run the numbers and make sure we understand it. But, you know, I would, on the other side, if you looked at what the market rents that were being proposed for Fairfield Station lofts units, you know, granted, it's a small development, so, you know, when you have a limited supply, you can pretty much ask what you want for them, and they will get it because there's only a few. But that should give us a little bit more confidence. If those numbers do hold up, you know, you can make an argument that it should be. We can demonstrate that, you know, 20%, particularly if you're providing higher levels of density.
Is it possible to, without a lot of work, benchmark where we stand with maybe other towns that are comparable in terms of economics?
Yeah, I would guess we'd have to look further down county to be comparable in economic area.
I thought maybe something like Avon or
maybe Avon, the Hartford, but I don't think their land values are quite.
no, they're definitely not. The land values are not going to be comparable.
Yeah, I think down county would be mine, but also nationwide, the rents are.
We could probably look in the Boston area to see what they might be doing. That might be comparable.
There was a list of like 6 towns in Connecticut that are similar to Fairfield, one being West Hartford.
Yep.
And I forget the other ones, and maybe we could look at those. Rents are really based on location, and so it's hard to find comparable communities.
It may require, maybe we need to do a, you know, rental market analysis, be able to quantify that in some process before setting.
Well, could we ask folks, like the ones who did the Knights of Columbus development?
Yeah.
You know, they've got developments all the way up to Boston and stuff, and.
All right. He's one of the ones I talked to, and we've been talking to them about development opportunity near Fairfield Metro, and, you know, he asked, and I said, well, our expectation would be, you know, if we're talking that level of density, 120%. Well, that's, you know, realistic, and I said, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
We can make it work, so,
Mhm.
you know, so, they may not be a completely objective party. We're on the other side of negotiations, and they're telling me 20% doesn't work, so we need to.
But you know, 20% has worked in New York City
Yeah, of
for
course.
40 years.
Of course. We're not in New York City, so, point
Yeah.
that out, but,
Our rents are getting up there though.
but yeah, I mean, again,
Hmm.
some of the rents that people are getting for these.
So this, number one, of changing the set-aside requirements, it's not just wordsmithing where you go in and change it from 10 to 15. It's gonna take more of a process.
I think we can, certainly in conversation, for example, with the new developer at Fairfield Metro, when we talked to them initially about their interest in the site and their plans, come in with a revised master plan application, 20% was what I talked about in terms of. So I understand it has a cost. They have to be able to make that up in market rate rents. May need to be able to demonstrate that the market can support that. So we may need to do some additional analysis. It may not be, you know, urbanized, doing some kind of back of the envelope thing.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to hire somebody to help us support our case, build our case, that the market will support that level of affordability without unduly burdening the developer. And, you know, still gonna make a reasonable rate of return on their investment. 30%.
Have you spoken to anybody at Jonathan Rose?
Not recently, no.
Yeah. They're a pretty, you know, experienced.
They are, and they don't do, they haven't done any development in Fairfield, so.
Yeah. They've been kind of quiet for a while, but they certainly understand the tri-state area.
Are there any incentives going the other way that are under discussion?
So one of my thoughts was, part of it may not require any kind of formal structure in terms of, you know, let's say, some kind of partial abatement. You know, part of it is, there's initial, we've been fairly fortunate in that the lease up, you know, before they get to stabilization, it's very short.
Mhm.
Sometimes it takes longer than that to reach stabilization, but, you know, they're leasing up things in 2 to 3 months, which is crazy.
Mhm.
But, you know, they're at risk. So, and part of it is how the tax assessor, what I heard back from these folks, how the tax assessor, brings online these projects, brings them to full valuation. And it's really quite quick. It's quick. Now, maybe that's justified in context of how these things are leasing developed, but, you know, they're almost going to full valuation, like, right off the bat. And so maybe there's an opportunity to structure that where it's a little bit more drawn out, that offsets some of those cost implications. Still get to the full valuation, it just may take a little. So, you know, that's a way of maybe structuring things that would provide a offset to the.
What about town bond financing?
You know, there's a lot of different ways to structure this. I was just trying to not come out of pocket.
Mhm.
Maybe it's easier for us to get less or take longer to get to the point in which we get tax money from them. That seems easier to me to sell than having to pay for something.
Right.
But, you know, somebody suggested to me, well, why don't you just, you know, go to these developers that are building, you know, they're doing 100 units and they have to do 20 units affordable. Why don't you just buy 10 more units affordable, and then we get to the moratorium faster? And it's like, well, not that we haven't thought of that, that's a great idea,
In theory.
but the issue for me is, if I'm gonna pay for it, I want the credit now. I don't want it 2 years from now when they go to CO.
Right.
So it's of less value to me to buy something that's gonna give me points 2 years off, as opposed to going to a guy that currently
Yeah.
owns a product and said, you know, if you lease that at an affordable rate, enter into a deed restriction for 4 years and you get this amount of money, that is a benefit from day one. So we're working, I haven't brought it to you guys yet, but, we are working to close our first two, deals with a private developer who has, he's purchasing existing two-family homes, renovating them, and is willing to deed restrict the units, Section 8 rental unit, 40 years in exchange for a $50,000 investment. Birth to a grant at the end of the 40-year term, so.
At the end of 40 years.
At the end of 40 years, it's the accounting balance loan, at the end of 40 years, he owes nothing. We get 40 years, two rental units for $50,000. And I will do that all day long, if he can make those numbers work. So we have two projects, 4 units, that are pending close, they're scheduled to close later this month. Assuming they close and we get everything on the, signed on the dotted line, you know, we'll come back and this could be something we want to replicate. He's very unique in his willingness to do this, but that has real value to us, I think, because you get those units and those points right away.
Approximately how many points?
So each one of those would be worth, 2 points.
Okay.
So 4 points each. So
So,
it's not,
yeah,
we're not getting,
I'm
you know, we're not talking
I'm
huge,
looking
But
for
I would rather have that than have it be these people building 40 or like 20 apartments in the little town, adding to the portfolio without really making a difference in our numbers.
you know, I think there's room to do both, but I think the bigger developments need to be in areas that are, that we've set aside for that kind of development. You know, next to the train station, okay, in the middle of a residential neighborhood, not so great. So-
my big thing is, I just feel it is so unfair. Have a house, another house that goes on the market, living right next door to a house, to take that house down and put it up an apartment building. I think it's unconscionable. I think it's so unfair. That's my big thing, is that these buildings should not go next door to single-family houses.
I mean, it's a zoning.
Yeah.
I know, but if you do it under
addressing that
830G,
within the
it seems like it's okay, and to me, I mean, I know I worked hard to save money for a down payment and pay my mortgage. It's, the house next door, if they did that, I mean, it's unfair. So I think if you're putting up a building, it's gotta be, like, to me, the trademark, the also. I think that's great. It's not right next door to somebody's
Right,
house.
it's in a commercial area.
It's in a commercial area, it's next to transit, I think that's okay. And I'm wondering about these two, 4480 Black Rock and 4221 and 4267. And those are huge point values, and I believe that's close to the Marriott, like maybe not next door to somebody's house.
Well, and some of these are more speculative than others, right?
Right.
So, the one at 4480, there has been a notable,
Right.
you know, this is, north of the Merritt. It's on the right-hand side as you're going up towards Easton. It's across from Greenfield Hunt, that area.
Right.
It's currently just a big hill with trees
It's a
on it.
big hill with trees on it, it's undeveloped. And, you know, the person who's developing it has proposed a fairly, you know, he has, so it's, I have 150 units because
Big parcel,
it's almost 5 acres.
right.
I have 150 units on because that's what he went to WPCA and got, an approval not to exceed 152 bedroom units, but he acknowledged at the time that there could be revisions to the plan, fewer units.
Right.
The unit makeup might be different depending on how things went with inland wetlands and planning and zoning, but it did go through inland wetlands. And so now I would anticipate he'll make an application to TP&Z,
Right.
in the near future. And then the one that's really, you know, I think, to me, is a little, point you were just making is Berkeley Road, because we're talking about
Is that
three,
near Skep
it's near Greenfield Street. It's around the corner from Greenfield Street, and, next to, it backs up to Tunstersville Park, there's 3 lots, and they're contiguous, and they all either have, a single in one case, it's a single family with a, in-law apartment, and then 2 multifamily, 2 duplex units on those sites. And it's proposing to take those 3 lots, which equal about 3/4 of an acre, and build a 40-unit, 830G apartment building on it. So, I guess on the one side, you have a
Right.
park behind, but on the
Right.
other, across the street and on either side, you have 2-family or single-family homes. So, it's in an area that is close to a commercial district, but
Right.
it's not really what I consider a transitional zone. And so I would prefer to see that 40-unit development downtown or on a Black Rock Turnpike or next to the train station on a commercial corridor where you don't have it right next to, you know,
Right.
smaller homes.
Yeah.
And you know, so I think that's a point well taken. I mean, I agree with you.
I feel it's not just me saying I don't want it in my backyard, but I don't. I bought a single-family house, I moved 30 years ago, I moved from New York to get away from city and get to suburbs. I didn't buy in a town where there were big buildings. I moved out the town, and I just feel that we owe it to the people who live here, a balance between we need affordable housing, we need to get to moratorium, but we shouldn't allow, I mean, I think the only way that we have control is that we get to moratorium, and I'm looking at these big numbers, and how do we help get this going?
Right, I will say, you know, the projects that are close, you know, we have 78 Umpqua Place, which obviously is in lease up, and they're, very close to getting their CO probably this fall. The one on Black Rock Turnpike, which is in construction, which is another smaller 830G development, and then we have, 5545 Park Avenue next to Sacred Heart and across from the Merritt Parkway, which was conditionally approved for 100 units. And again, they're in the process of pulling their building permit. So between those 3 projects,
Yeah.
those 3 projects will put us over the required.
And
That
then
last
we
one
just
is 2 years
focus on,
out.
like, middle.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 2 years, because unless we can somehow bridge the gap with these other
Right.
things like buy-in deed restrictions somehow, or some other way.
Mark, that's 78 Umpqua, 528 Black Rock Turnpike?
528 Black Rock Turnpike, 78 Umpqua Place, and 5545
Park.
Park Avenue are the 3 that combined would give us enough points to meet the threshold.
980 High Street, looks like this says approved.
It was approved by TP&Z, it was not approved by Inland Wetlands.
Oh, okay.
So, they will need to resubmit to Inland Wetlands.
Right.
And then address Inland Wetlands concerns as it relates to and, you know, we had met with, the Housing Authority and their development team months back, just to understand what their was, and I thought that they might be making a application soon, but I haven't seen it. I haven't talked to Carol.
If we could circle back to, the topic, which was,
Sorry.
the affordable housing plan, and, so again, we've got, 7 strategies that we had outlined and 4 key supporting actions. And, we should select 1 or 2 and move on them as best we can. The first one, which we've just been talking about, is the set-aside requirements. Is there anything that we can do, or is it Does it have to wait until we meet with planning and zoning
I
officially?
don't think it has to meet, you know, I think Herb made a good suggestion. We could reach out to other communities and just benchmark where we are, understand the process that they went through to get to, you know, if they have a higher set-aside requirement, how do they do that process, and maybe, you know, we can learn from
Mhm.
their example. I do think that we may need to spend a little bit of money to maybe bring in somebody to kind of do something a little bit more formal to support our case.
You
I
know,
don't think
but
that's a huge amount of money, and that may not, I'm not suggesting it comes out of the housing trust fund. I'd rather marshal our funds for some other purpose, but maybe we can find, you know, another pot of money that we can, depends on how much it is.
Yeah, $8,000, you know,
If
the
it's five,
trust
if
fund,
it's
yeah,
5 to
yeah.
10, I'm sure we can come up with
Yeah.
something.
But then how do we do that? How do we get things moving?
Well, I'll commit to reporting back at our next meeting on
Mhm.
this.
Should we call some communities like Westport, Darien, Norwalk?
If, like to do that, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Well, I just mentioned those communities because I'm pretty sure that Westport, has gone through an analysis.
I know Norwalk did.
Norwalk has it in their regs.
Norwalk went through an analysis, and they also hired a consultant
Mm,
to, do an analysis to support that.
Yeah.
And they were able to push that.
And I think Darien as well. There's only 3 members here. So I'm happy to call one of the communities. Anybody else raise their hand about, calling to see what,
Well, maybe we can find probably a lot of stuff initially just online,
Yeah.
looking at their regs, and
Yeah.
then maybe we ought to be more strategic or structured in terms of the questions we're asking, so it's not, we're all asking kind of the same.
I think it's good, so it's like a standard set of questions.
Okay.
And we can just,
well, then can someone, I would say I'll take Westport. Does somebody want to take Darien and look at their regs? Someone want to look at Norwalk's regs? Greenwich, Stanford?
Not that I don't want to.
Well, and if you
It's
want,
that,
Yeah.
I'm happy to make phone calls, it's just that a lot of this is still new. If you could give me specific questions or things to,
I think you're right, I think we should have a script.
Well,
Yeah.
but
But I
it's not
think,
calling.
We
but
should
it's-
definitely have a script.
yeah, I think if you wanna
draft,
look at a couple,
Yeah.
I do have the luxury of having an intern
Yeah.
that's always looking for stuff to do,
Mhm.
and I will have him
that'd be great.
do that.
Mhm.
I don't wanna take away from your pleasure, but I
That's not my, I want to
Really
get
have him-
some action. I want to get some things done.
can certainly have him do that.
Yeah.
And if you, can just make sure that we have the list of communities,
Mhm.
like we'll make sure that we're on page. Like that, if anyone wants to add any others.
Yeah, and maybe between now and next meeting, you can just give us an update.
Yeah.
like, in terms of where things stand, and then we can, you know, and we can volunteer to call X, Y, Z if we want to without.
And I'll look at the Darien stuff and circulate before the next meeting some info. That's number 1 on the list. Number 2 was the DRD stuff, which,
Think of the DRD, I mean, this is where I think we need some education.
mm,
And I think if we can maybe have some discussion, with Jim or Emmeline come about, you know, what DRD is and what, maybe what some other towns have done and what some of the options they see might, just so we have some, you know, ideas in terms of where we can start. Because I think right now it's probably too much of an unknown.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a Chinese menu of different options, and we didn't go into any depth there. It's like throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what's gonna stick and what might resonate with planning and zoning. I don't know if it would be worth having a further follow-up conversation with Glenn to see if he can point us to
Yeah.
examples of communities that have, implemented that. Maybe we wanna foster a panel, if we could find a couple different communities that have done this, overlaid zones and taken different approaches, maybe we could, have a panel discussion or invite some of those folks to a future meeting. I've done that to other communities, where I've been a guest speaker to talk about our work here, so maybe we can.
I think that'd be great. I mean, they could appear online if they.
Right,
Yeah.
we've got the opportunity to do Zoom, so, I wanna ask them to drive down from Avon if they wanna
Mhm.
do that, but Glenn must have come up with those ideas from somewhere, we didn't really have an in-depth conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Want to talk to Glenn?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I will talk to Glenn. Number 3 on the list was working with the Housing Authority. I had invited Carol tonight, but, Carol Martin, who runs the Housing Authority, both here and in Westport. She couldn't tonight, they had a conflict. Next month is gonna be a difficult month, usually is August. September, I think, is gonna be a full month, isn't it? Don't we have other things planned?
Well, I think we should, see what her availability is and have her to a meeting, whether it's on a regular meeting night, or maybe we wanna have a special meeting if people are available.
I prefer a regular meeting, but so I wanted to propose to her September or October.
Sure.
Whatever you think is okay?
Sure.
Yeah, okay,
That's a priority for us, so the earlier the better.
yeah.
Is that something that we can tee up in terms of, agenda for the meeting, or things that we, prepare questions in advance that we might have for Carol? Is there any way we can make that meeting as efficient, as effective as possible?
I think some questions, in advance for ourselves and for her, so that she knows, what to look at, what to talk about, how to do her homework. And, housing authorities can do things that they haven't done in Fairfield. They don't have to just do the low-income housing tax credit deals. They can do other stuff. Towns like Fairfield, typically, they don't get that active. In big cities, they do, so. Is there what type of question did you have in mind, or is it just whatever we can think of, or?
Yeah, I didn't have a list
Yeah.
in mind, Steve. I just was thinking about, again, just trying to, this is a big priority for us, I think. These are 100% affordable, right?
Yeah.
So it's great to
Yeah,
get
pretty
them.
much, yeah.
So, we talked about the fact that some of these other towns have much greater penetration of housing authority construction in them. So this hopefully is an opportunity for us, and how can we move it along as possible? But I didn't have a list.
All right, well, let me reach out to Carol to see if she has some questions that she could give us, that we can give her. And I'll just tell you a couple of them. Housing authorities can bond. They can float bonds for affordable housing. And, if interest rates keep climbing, that funding gets, more attractive. Housing authorities can do single-family homes. They don't have to do 40 apartments, Now, everybody knows that it's as difficult to do 4 units as it is to do 40. It's the same kind of time involvement generally. And so you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. But I'd like to hear from her what she thinks in the universe is possible, and then why the housing authority doesn't do that. Why are they only doing narrowly focused rather than the bigger? So let me talk to Carol and see if we can get a list of ideas, questions for her. And then I would circulate whatever I find out. I've only got one more that I want to talk about, which is the number 4 strategy, to establish or strengthen design and location guidelines. I think that we've got the location guidelines generally. They follow zoning. Do we have any design guidelines?
only in the center design district and the limited amount in the one overlay district.
Mhm.
There's some, but, you know, again, I think they could be strengthened and reinforced, and I think there, some zoning regulations, actually include visual illustrations of the type of design treatments they're looking for.
Mhm.
Not just X, but, you know, here's visually what we're trying to accomplish here, and
Mhm.
so I think, you know, there is room for improvement.
I think so too. I'm not sure what we can do that the affordable, really think this is a zoning, and
Yeah,
space with them.
and maybe we're playing maybe we're, playing a support role in asking zoning, how can we help, you know, further that conversation? You know, is it a resource-related question, like, do we need to bring in some folks with some specific expertise to help us, create a pattern book like
Mhm.
Lynn had suggested? So, you know, maybe we could raise dollars for that, or, you know, figure out how to put that.
Maybe I could ask Glenn about that, since I'm gonna be talking about
Another,
the
you know,
PRD.
what I think we missed here, that I recall, I had a much better idea, and maybe because there were so many other things that were competing for attention, while we were trying to finish this up, and we were under the constraint to try to finish it by June 1st. But I felt like the 2014 plan, we had more, examples of that, like case studies. Here's, you know, we talked about inclusionary zoning, but here are 2 or 3 communities that have done that. So it seemed like it was queued up and ready to, you know, we could call like Darien Bouquet. In this case, you know, we had, maybe it's just me, but I didn't feel like we had as much as structure in that sense.
Mhm.
There are pattern books out there, right?
Yeah,
And,
I remember Carrie identified one.
yeah, Carrie had one, or identified one, had one, I'm not sure, I had a bunch of books that she passed on to the company.
Yeah.
I'll go back and check through those to see if there's anything, but Glenn certainly seemed to resonate with Glenn. So Glenn when you talk with Glenn, Steve, you might ask him about pattern books, and if he has any that he can
Or
identify.
design, people have done, incorporated design guidelines in their zoning regulations effectively. Communities that we should talk to about their experience.
I will say, I've been involved with one community that had design guidelines, requirements, and it could be torturous, you know, so, you gotta be careful how you implement it.
Yeah, I understand. I don't wanna incorporate an architectural review board or anything like,
Right.
like, we don't wanna create another layer of bureaucracy
Right.
to further slow down the process. But I think, you know, developers, you know, they wanna get through the process as efficiently and as quickly as, and it's easier if we tell them exactly what we want, what we expect. You know, most of them welcome that, because it makes their
Right.
job a little easier.
Okay. To that.
So aren't Jim and Emmeline part of a planning network?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they potentially could, you know, run that concept past.
I agree. Yeah, there's a
Mm.
listserv for planners, and, they're part of the Connecticut Planning Association of Planners. They can, probably put it out.
Do you know, Mark, what TP&Z's workload or agenda is? What do they wanna work on for the next 6 months or 8 months? Because if we don't line up with that, then, you know.
I think, like most of us, they're flat out just managing the stuff that's coming in by it. It doesn't give them a lot of time, either the commissioner staff, much time to look ahead and think strategically. And I think the POCD update forces them to do that a little bit,
Mhm.
but even there, they're having trouble budgeting time, to put much attention, resources to that. So that, I think that's their big strategic,
Mhm.
it should be, the POCD and zoning reg. But my experience has been that most the applications flowing fast and furious is just trying to keep up
I wonder if they couldn't have a subcommittee, otherwise we don't manage
on the
that.
commission.
But if they couldn't have, the commission couldn't have a subcommittee
I
that,
mean, they already meet twice a month, you know.
Wow.
Twice a month, and those meetings are not
Yeah.
short meetings
Yeah.
either.
They're
so
short meetings.
They're, it's tough to ask them,
Yeah.
you know, they do make a substantial time.
Well, can I or you, like, send this list to Jim and Emmeline? This is our,
Yeah,
and say, you know, out of these 11, you know, maybe which one should we list as number one that, you know?
okay, yeah,
It's okay?
yep, I can do that.
You wanna do it, want me to do it?
If you wanna send it to me, and I'll forward it to Jim and Emmeline, and ask them,
Fine.
it'll be fine.
Okay,
'Cause I'm not sure I have that.
okay,
Send-
I will, okay. So, teeing up, Herb on, the town-owned properties and other properties that, Herb has been looking at.
Well, with town-owned properties, and I was looking at the water and sewer properties. It would obviously be the easiest to move on. And I kept whittling the list down, and whittling it down.
We whittled it down very
Whittling it
quickly.
down, and so we were down to about 20. I shared them with Mark and Steve. I think I talked more generally about it last time, but then we had a subsequent discussion at this meeting, and Steve pointed out that very, very few of these are, you know, have any legs at all, in part because of water issues, and I maybe didn't pick up all of the water issues, that some of the water issues were not being in a flood zone, but maybe having water going through the property and so forth. And also, Mark's intern, Ben, took a look at these. So I think we're down to just a few of these that really seem to have.
Might merit further consideration.
That it
We're
might
talking
merit
less
further
than five, you know, a
Yeah.
couple, two or three, maybe. And part of it is, you know, until you actually look at a site, you don't maybe know the history of it. So we had a couple that were developed as pocket parks, where the neighborhood was very active in development, they're not gonna be very receptive.
Yeah, I mean, they look great on the
Yeah.
surface, but, you know, when you dig down and look at them, they're parks that
Right.
they're not gonna wanna give up. There were a couple, Ben had mentioned a couple that are not watered and sewered, I think, that are up by, above the Merit. And Steve had a suggestion too, related to that. John Wynn had championed the concept of, at Palmer's, on the Ruger plant. It would require some work.
Yes.
But so there are lots like this that we can explore further, but there isn't a lot of,
It's not an
Well,
obvious,
not a
it's not an
lot.
obvious candidate.
yeah,
Right.
it's not an obvious candidate. So then we went on to look at other properties, and
Wait just a second. The one on Tungus Hill that, Operation Hope was looking at, what's happening with that?
Well, so, Operation Hope is actively pursuing the adjoining lot, and, they would hope to develop those two together, to relocate their administrative offices, their food kitchen, food
Oh,
pantry.
really?
Yeah, their lease is up, they're on borrowed time
Oh.
where they are currently, and we've been actively looking, trying to assist them in finding another location in Fairfield for their work.
That's such a great location.
It is,
It's right
but
behind the police
it-
department, it's easy to
Oh.
get to, it's just.
They've been booted out of behind the police department, because the police department wants that building. And
Really?
so, in the church across the street, and that
Yeah.
first, it is.
Oh, First Church.
Church.
Yeah.
So
That's a great
basically,
location.
now they're almost homeless themselves, so.
That's unfortunate.
So we've been working with them to find, and we looked at a lot of different sites, and ultimately even though it wasn't their first choice, I persuaded them to look at 488 Tungus, where the town has a garage, it's not being used. And we've gone through the process to modify the reversion clause with the state, that we acquired the property from the state. And had to go to the General Assembly and get them to change the special act. And, at the time, we were thinking that it would be a development site, potentially to housing. I did talk to Carol, I talked to some other housing developers, and by itself, it's relatively small. It's not a very big site. The development opportunities are rather limited unless you're, coupling it with other adjoining parcels. And to make a long story short, went back to Operation Hope and said, well, yes, and so they've been negotiating an agreement with, to purchase the adjoining property in hopes that they could put them together, and that would be the location for their offices and support functions. And the state now has said, well, the reversion clause is not modified sufficiently to allow for this particular use, and we need to go back and modify the special act one more time. So,
I thought we already had it.
I thought I did too, but the AG's office, it went all the way up to the, through the commissioner in the AG's office, and basically said, we'd rather not have an issue with title, rather you, we know it's gonna take more time, but, you have our support. Back to the General Assembly, the upcoming session, get them to modify the special act one more time. I will now have a specific use for the site. Hopefully we'll have the support of not just the state, but the town, to try to put that together, but that's the plan. The plan's still, and I guess it's,
That, to me, seems like more time, and
Right.
for Operation Hope, more
Yeah.
anxiety and
Yeah,
work.
that's really,
it is,
Yeah.
but I don't have an alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
that's the, if there was another, like Herb we just talked about, if there was another site in town, we've been looking at this for 2+ years.
Yeah.
We haven't identified one yet that
Mhm.
works and, that they can afford.
Mhm.
And this, at least we somewhat control this site.
Yeah.
So it's a good location for the use
Mhm.
because it's on a bus line. Relatively convenient, it's on a main road, but, the big issue is the building is fine, but, the building is not fine. The roof is falling, but they can do something with the building footprint. It's the parking that's
Yeah.
the problem.
And the two together would be almost an acre?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the plan.
fine, okay. Sorry for the interruption, Herb, but,
Okay, so we looked at the town parcels, and there are a few potentials, but they're not, immediate high potential opportunities. And we started to look at other properties, privately owned properties. And, so I found out that Mark's notion was different from the way I was thinking, and that Steve had another, line of thinking.
I think we still should get together one more time,
Yeah.
probably align our thinking.
So Mark had been thinking about looking at, Zone B lots that did not quite, duplex lots, Zone B, that did not quite meet the, 9,000 square foot, requirement. And then also looking at Zone C lots that, did not make the, requirements. Those requirements vary, based upon whether it's 2-family, 3-family, or 4-family. And so, I was initially going in kind of a different direction. I was actually looking at relatively affordable lots that, were Zone B, that didn't necessarily fall within the constraint that Mark was looking at. So I went back and looked at what Mark was trying to look at, and Ben may be doing the same thing, but, did identify some lots that would fall within, that possibility for Zone B. For Zone C, there were not as many. There were only maybe 10 or 12, I think, that would seem to work for Zone C.
And my thought was motivated by looking at, are there opportunities to do additional 2 to 4 unit development in town without changing, the
Right.
makeup of the neighborhood, right?
I
So
love that.
if you look at, let's just take Zone B, Residence B zone, for example. I've come to appreciate the fact that there's a lot of existing non-conforming uses in these zones, where you have a duplex on a less than 9,000 square foot lot. So I wanted to understand first, what is the makeup of Residence B zone? How many are single-family zones, how many are two-family lots? And of the two-family, for example, how many are actually 9,000 square feet, or are there some that are less? What's the makeup? And within the single family, are there single-family developments on 9,000 square foot lots? So could they potentially be converted very easily from a single-family home to a two-family home? Without, again, that's current zoning. So I just want to understand the universe, and then I asked Ben to take a look at, well, how many fall within, let's say, if we take Residence B and duplex lots, you need 9,000. How many are 8,000 to 8,499? How many are 8,500 to, 8,900? I wanted to see what the grouping was. And then, I don't know what the rhyme or reason between, why 9,000 square feet? Would it be 8,500 square feet? Would it be 8,000 square feet? Is there a big difference? And so if the majority of actual duplexes in the Residence B zone are non-conforming and are at 8,500 square feet, could we set the lot size at 8,500 square feet instead of 9? And how many other potential lots, duplex building lots, could you create? So I thought it was wanted to understand what our regulations require and why.
Right.
And see
Can I
what
ask
the
a question
opportunity
about that?
was.
If 9,000 square feet was what the zoning calls for, and you're talking about 8,500, do you know, could we go on a lot-by-lot basis and you get a variance?
You can.
Yeah.
But and one of the examples, this is, remember there was a 10 unit set-aside development on Oldfield Road that was approved. It was appealed by a distant neighbor, shall we say. And ultimately, the settlement of that was, he came back in with a 6-unit market rate development, 3 two-family homes, in a zone that only allows for 1 two-family. He went to the zoning board of appeals with the neighborhood support, and zoning board of appeals granted a variance. Now, what's the hardship, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
There isn't really any.
Yeah.
But that just shows it's a little bit flexible, right?
Right.
So my thought was the hardship is affordable housing. And so
Right.
if we go in and say, give us this at 8,500, because it's affordable housing. And that,
But the issue, with any of those things, I would say that's, I think it's a good argument, but the reality is, a lot of the zoning board of appeals, those decisions are very subjective and may not withstand an appeal from an aggrieved neighbor
Right.
that says, I don't like
Right.
your hardship and I'm gonna
Right.
take it to court.
Yeah.
But, let's say we change the zoning regs and say, well, instead, it's 9,000 square feet, except if you're doing, two-family and one of those units is affordable for at least 40 years, you can do it for 8,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Could we do that? Why not?
Yeah.
You build it into the zoning regs.
And I think it does help to look at some of these properties. So, maybe we sample the universe
mhm.
of properties that are within, 8,500 to 9,000 or 8,250 to whatever, to actually show some examples where we don't think harm would be done.
Right.
And we can build,
Exactly,
Right.
Ben wants to go right to first we have to understand what the current lay of the land is. We have to understand what the current situation is.
But why isn't Ben here?
He works in the day, but we can invite him to it.
Yeah. Okay,
I'll compensate him.
yeah. But, yeah, please have him come. But, so,
'Cause they didn't-
you've already got the splits. You've got 8,000 square feet, 8,500, 9,000, right? So you could pull out you could give me 10 to drive by or something, right?
and I can organize this by street, by neighborhood,
Yeah,
so if.
Just wanna make sure, I
whatever.
think it would be helpful for the 3 of us and Ben to sit down, just make sure we have the same data set that we're looking at.
mhm.
So you've got a different data set, I think, that Ben's using.
Yeah, so
I wanna make sure we're using.
If you could send
Yeah.
us Ben's data set, that would be
Oh,
helpful.
okay, so we'll do that. Just wanna make sure we're all on this.
Because what I have, the set that we have is, if it's, let's say proprietary in a sense, it's something that Spiritual View helped us to put together by merging the voter database and the assessor database. And so we're missing properties associated with non-voters, for example.
Mhm.
And there are other situations where we can't readily, we have to work around, like, for instance, 245 Umpqua. You know, we have a SCAD of units that have 245 Umpqua addresses. We can't readily work those together the same way we can. So there's some limitations, but probably would be
And-
good to compare the databases.
And can I make a suggestion? Like, can we do this in like the fall, or I just feel like if we do this in the summer, like right now, or even in August, everything is going to be extremely overgrown and we're not going to get a really good idea of what the site looks like.
Yeah.
I think we have a little bit of data analysis to do before we actually do the site visits. So I
Okay.
think it will work with your timing, that we, by the time we're ready to actually look at specific sites and take some photos and help document that, it might be the fall anyway, the way we're going, so. That
Okay,
makes
so I
sense.
guess that works out.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I'm like,
That's a good point.
what the
Yeah.
back of my house looks like versus like right now versus what it looks like in the fall is like a totally different place, right? Right
Yeah.
now you'd be like, no, that's like a giant forest, so we can't build anything there. But in the fall, it's like, all right, maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
Okay, question for you guys. Have either of you worked with Spec Print, the firm? So they have maps of Fairfield. They have maps of lots of communities. They used to be I think a bigger firm, but, you know, they can give frontages. I'm gonna call MLS, because they have a really good map there too. And so, it might be easy for them. MLS, I don't know if either one of these would charge us, but, I thought we needed a certain frontage for development.
Yeah, this is a very rudimentary analysis. I'm taking one variable, which is lot size, which is easy to understand, and tweaking that.
Right.
But there is a frontage requirement,
Yeah.
you know, how many feet on a square.
Yeah.
So in the Residence B zone for a duplex, you need 60 feet of frontage. Now, why 60 feet? Why not 50 feet? I don't know either.
Right.
But again, we could repeat this for a lot of, you know, setbacks from side yard, rear yard.
Right.
You can change all those variables. But lot size seemed like the easiest one to start with and understand. And I just, you know, I thought it would be worthwhile, to do that little exercise and see what it looks like. Because my sense is, from looking at a couple of these areas, is that there are quite a few duplex properties that happily exist in the neighborhood, but they don't have 9,000 square foot lots. So if it works and doesn't create an undue hardship in the neighborhood, maybe we don't need a 9,000 square foot lot. So I think that's to your point. Yeah.
So you got information from the tax assessor's office.
Yeah, so what we started with was an updated database that came from Ross Murray.
Mhm.
And we had done it before the 2020 reval, but we did it again after the 2020 reval. Now, he hasn't updated that for me since then. I mean, maybe.
I asked him for the current, so.
That'd be great to have it. Then we'd have the current, and we could just use that, Mark, I'll compare what's in the assessor database versus what I have. And if there's no advantage to ours, we'll just certainly use.
Yeah, I don't,
Assessor's
you know, for
database.
this level of analysis, we probably don't need much more. Trying to get a sense as to how big is the lot, where's it located, and what's built on it, if anything.
Yeah, and he captures neighborhood.
Yeah.
He's got census, tract.
Yeah.
You know, street, of course, and whatnot. So, and then, Ben or I can modify the fields if necessary to make it easier to work with. He's got gaps in his data, so, when I say gaps, like blanks, specifically, so we've got to fill the blanks in the spreadsheet, so we can,
Yep.
yeah, but we can do all that.
But the assessor's information, is that the same information that Appraisal Vision has?
Yeah,
Yeah,
essentially, yeah.
It's not the same level of detail as a vision appraisal, but it's the guts of what is in vision appraisal.
Correct.
yeah,
It comes from a massive data set, and then
Yeah.
it's like, well, what do you want?
yeah,
So I tell him, I need these fields.
yeah.
And then he gives me that Excel spreadsheet so that we can, so you could have asked for different fields, you know, like, I didn't ask for census tract or, you know, that wasn't part of the analysis, really.
But if Herb had 3 or 4 questions that he would like information, that he could then ask you or Ben, and you or Ben could
Mhm.
ask and see if it's available, and,
Yep.
yeah, okay. Is there a question down there?
Nope.
No? Okay, all right.
Yeah, if you or Ben could send me what you have when you get it, I could see
Yeah,
if there's anything that seems to be
So
glaring that's maybe missing, and I could just tell you what I think it would.
I suggested maybe we'd have another
Yeah,
sit down. And then because Ben is very excited about this, he's also compiling a list of affordable housing candidate sites, which probably, after I go through that analysis, I'll probably have some similar bad news for him, but,
mhm.
you know, he's very excited, so I said, well, just put it on a
Good.
list,
Yeah.
put it aside, and then we'll talk about it, so
Well, we should set up a meeting,
I
yeah,
was hoping we.
face to face, not a Zoom, a real
Yeah.
meeting. Okay. Anything more over there?
I think that's all we really need to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to mention too, I got an email from, Carrie's partner, or was it her brother, about a memorial?
It's her
Brother.
It's her brother.
Yeah,
Brother, yeah.
and that's a ways off, I think.
Saturday sometime, and,
I thought it's September,
Yeah.
as I recall, it's a Saturday in September, that maybe the 17th.
Yeah, I don't think, has that been circulated to the committee?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I was waiting to get more information from him, and I wasn't sure
Yeah.
how they were doing it, who was invited, what was going on.
Well, I will just circulate it to the committee, just so you have the save the date kind of thing. Update on the developments.
So, you know, I think we touched upon a number of these already, but I mentioned Oldfield Road, which, you know, was on our list before, and I'm taking it off because it seems like it's been abandoned in favor of this 6-unit market rate development that went through the ZBA.
Mhm.
Plant Factory site, which is 4185, was approved for a 94-unit development, was on appeal by the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, among others. And, recently, you know, the developer of that site has come back and said, well, I have a tenant now for medical office, and I want to do medical office on the site. So they're moving ahead with that plan, which was the original plan for that
Yeah.
site. So it comes full circle. And then, I included Berkeley Road, which just recently has emerged and is on the inland wetlands agenda for, I believe, a public hearing later, in either next month or December. Pretty aggressive development. I had talked to these guys a while back when they found out we were doing Greenfield Street, and they asked if there was a possibility of partnering with the town. And they said, well, I said, what are you thinking of? And they were like, well, we're gonna do an 830G. And I was like, well, there's no way I'm partnering with you to do an 830G project in town. Maybe that's not, you know, they had already acquired the site, so clearly something was in the offing, and here we have it. And then, as I mentioned, the other projects that have been working their way through the system, if you will. I think we talked about all those, but, that's largely where we are. The only other one I didn't list on this yet is the, Fairfield Metro Center development. The property, did close, did change hands. We have a new developer, from a New Jersey-based firm called Accurate Builders and Developers. They've done some mixed use and residential developments primarily in New Jersey, where they're from, but they've, been broadening their horizon, done a little bit of work in Connecticut, and now they have, the development rights to this site, and they're, in the process, again, pulling posting bonds and pulling permits to do the first building.
Really,
Good news.
really moving forward, that's great. What about the old steel factory that's right adjacent?
Backside or the Reiner site, yes,
Next-
81 Black Rock Turnpike.
Yeah.
So, I have talked to a number of developers with regard to that site. It's almost a 5-acre site. This is between the Fairfield Metro Center parking lot and where Planet Fitness is currently. There's a
UBJ.
whole-
Behind, Bigelow,
Yeah, on the other side of Bigelow, on the other side of the tracks.
okay, I know where you're talking about.
So there's
Yep, I know where you're
there's a
talking about.
foundation that's still left. They took
Yeah.
the building down. It was part of the Bullards Foundry, so it has some similar environmental issues that have to be dealt with. The owner is a little bit eccentric. He lives in Florida, has a lot of money, so he's the definition of an unmotivated, seller, but we've been trying to find somebody to do something productive with the site. And, did talk to the guys, among one of the groups I talked to was the people who developed the Anchorage. Done, these types of projects in not just Fairfield, but Boston and New Haven. They live, the principals live in Fairfield. Said, what do you think? And they've been talking to the owner, and I think they're negotiating a purchase and sale agreement.
Oh, excellent.
But they're also the ones I said, well, if you're doing something along the lines of what's been talked about with planning and zoning conceptually for that site, we would like to see 20% affordable. Oh, that's aggressive. I said, well, yeah. Different ways to slice the apple, but that's what we like.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
it's in the mix.
yeah. Good. And not in our town, but across the street, there's a big development. Do you know
Yeah,
the
it's
status of
Spinnaker.
that?
What's that?
Do you know the status? Like-
Very close to being completed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Theater property?
Yeah, movie theater property,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like almost
Yeah,
done.
Spinnaker,
300 units, I think it was,
Yep.
something like that.
it is.
And so that will affect the marketability, I think, of the other sites, but it may be an attraction.
It's funny, because I've talked to, a number of folks who do this, and all signs indicate there's a lot of demand for this stuff, and they don't see it going away anytime soon. They think some of these trends are here to stay. Post-COVID, I'm flummoxed by it. I can't imagine paying $5,000-$6,000 a month for an
No.
apartment.
Mhm.
No.
I don't think that market is really deep, but,
Yeah.
but there are other people that are really bullish on these things, and who's to say? Because every time a product comes to market, they're snatched up quicker than you can
Right.
say.
They wouldn't do
So
it
I
if
don't know
they
where,
wasn't-
it's,
Um,
I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
at some point you're gonna reach it where you get a saturation point, but apparently,
We're
They
not
don't
there
see
yet, yeah. And you can still borrow for almost next to nothing. It's now 5% or something, but it's still really, really cheap, so.
so, with those developments, again, we're probably still short of coming up with a strategy that takes existing units and converts them to 50 points. Looking at it based on the current development trends.
Yeah, and there's really no way we could speed that up. I mean, how do you pick up that many points
Yeah,
quickly?
the only way you do it is, I don't know, you have to find somebody that's existing and say,
Yeah.
be 25 units or something, buy 25 units in town. I'm already playing, we already are playing some games with these numbers, because I still have to do the deal with Operation Hope to get those units, point values of those units up a little bit.
You gave us a little map here.
Yeah, so, we own 4 properties at Parkview Commons. They're in the dark pink lines. And, we've been in conversations with the owners at 320, 336, and 376. That was the original plan. to try to put, 4 or 5 lots together on that side of the street to create about a 1 acre, development parcel, 1 plus acre. And, you know, my recent conversations with the folks, some of the folks is they don't, they're still interested, but they don't have an exit plan, you know, so they don't have a place to go buy, and
Right.
prices being what they are, that seems, it is kind of what we have. The exception is 376, which is in foreclosure. And we've been talking to the bank or the attorney representing the bank about, you know, the town's interest and whether we can, you know, satisfy, you know, their lien debt and, you know, provide some way for the homeowner to extricate himself from that mess. So that's, but that will give us 3 lots on that side, all of which are at least 9,000 square feet, and the 2 on the other side, all of which are 9,000 square feet. So the good news is that 4 that we own are all duplex building lots from a lot size standpoint. 376 would be as well. So, you know, one possibility would be, you know, just going with the 4 or 5 that we have, going out with a similar RFQ that we did for Greenfield Street and asking for qualification statements from prospective development partners. I know both the firms that responded, nonprofits that responded to Greenfield Street are interested. We can see what we can put together.
All of these homes, all of them account quick approximately 50. And because they were before 1990, they don't count.
No, they all count.
Oh, they all.
They're all, but these are all,
Single?
they're single-family homes, ownership units. We have 22 deed-restricted affordable home ownership units. And the plan would be, can we replace the single-family with 2-family ownership units
Right.
on the site? Or 3-family ownership units on the site?
397, you've had discussions with them?
We've talked to her, she's not interested.
Mhm.
She's very concerned about what we're doing on the parcels, but, 409 and 385, both were, you know, they had reached a point where they wanted to move on,
Mhm.
and we just, and with your help, we thought, strike while the iron's hot, so we did get those so we could control them, but that wasn't part of the original plan. The original plan was on the other side of the street, and that didn't come together as quickly.
Well, 376 and 336, 320, you said that they didn't have plans currently to move, you know, to sell, but could they be enticed to sell and move, and then move back in?
Maybe.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, maybe. 320 definitely is interested in selling, but, you know, I hate to pursue 320 without 336.
Yeah.
Right.
376 seems, I mean, I'm trying to focus on 376 because it's in foreclosure, and I think, you know, it might be,
Right.
present an earlier opportunity for us, and it's contiguous, and then kind of work back. Market could change, and maybe we look at a different development. You know, that side of the street might allow for a different type of development than maybe if we took these 2 individual lots and said, just build us a duplex. That's at the right flood elevation, maybe that's maybe we do something a little bit more intensive on that side, and still.
Well, can we help with 376?
I don't know, you know, the attorney for the bank didn't wanna talk to me, so I put him in touch with my attorney, since they seem to like to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And now I just need to, I talked to my attorney again and said, hey, how's it going? And, I just need to keep on him, so. The good news is that they were really pushing there was a lot of activity in the bankruptcy and, not the foreclosure,
Mhm.
the court.
Yep.
And they were setting a sale date, and they've pulled all that back. So I think, hopefully they are of a mindset now that, because originally when I talked to the representative, when he did talk to me, he was like, well, you just come and bid on it at the auction date. And it's like, well, can we
Right.
short circuit that process, and I can come up with something that satisfies your, the amount of money that you're owed, and not to go through all that.
It's also credit, CRA credits for the bank if they do it right.
Yeah.
I'm happy to call bankers if you ever want me to. Let me know.
If I find, I don't think it would hurt, so let me see if I can find a person there.
Okay.
And Greenfield Street, we have been negotiating a development agreement to present to the Board of Selectmen. It's really, I think, more to formalize our agreement with Habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would negotiate a ground lease for the site, which will then have to go back to all kinds of different boards for their approval. But I am proceeding with the demolition of the existing unit. Hire somebody. I'm using community development block grant dollars to paint and demo the building, and that was more to just eliminate the hazard, the nuisance of having a derelict vacant property over there. So should be demoing that within the next 30 days.
Town do the demo itself?
We hired somebody.
Yeah.
But we waived the permit fees against ourselves. So,
Okay.
so moving ahead, I did talk to the parish about, Bureau Street,
Mm-hmm.
and, the offer has changed a bit, so they're no longer interested in, selling the convent piece. They only are interested in selling the school, and, they want $2 million for that, not $1.5 million. I don't think they have any other offers at the moment. There was somebody else interested, which is what, put the Carol's proposal on hold. That seems to have dried up, probably because he came to his senses and figured that he couldn't really do much with that site, but, $2 million is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
It's about an acre,
Mm-hmm.
but, you got to do something with the school, and
Mm-hmm.
it's, what are you talking, units there, probably, to make that work?
67, maybe?
At $1 million?
Yeah.
Or $2 million?
2 million, yeah.
Yeah.
I have 67, so.
Yeah.
That's pretty high
That's a
density.
pretty high density for that
Yeah.
site. I mean,
Yeah.
that went from Carol proposing something that was less than 30 units, I think, to, double that and more.
Yeah.
And Carol can tolerate a little bit more in terms of the unit price on the dirt, but not that much, so. It's a shame.
Yeah.
And we do have, the Housing Trust,
Yeah.
We are at 214 as of, the end of June.
214, and then like another $1.2 million or something that we've sunk into Parkview Commons.
Yeah, which we've all paid cash. We
Yeah.
have the borrowing capacity.
Yeah.
So that, the 214 is reflective of all that money coming out and being paid, cash
Yeah.
out of the Housing Trust Fund.
Mhm.
We do have borrowing authority to just need to have an exit strategy to pay the money back.
Yeah.
Borrow, so, I think, again, what we best utilize, some of our dollars for is really providing the development, the dirt, somebody can then build on. We can use it for other things, as you said.
So,
when I talk to developers, they're like, well, you know, if you give us the land, we can do good things, so.
And what would happen to the school, Amherst? I mean, I'm interested in selling the school. So what
He's interested in selling the school, not the
Not
convent.
Yeah.
So it was both sides of the street at one
I
point.
see. So
Now
what
it's
is-
just the school.
And what do they plan to do with the convent?
They have a use for it. He didn't elaborate, but for the offer.
It's a nice building, you know, it's not big, like the current convent, and,
Yep. It would take some work to make it usable
Mhm.
for housing, for example.
Yeah. Talking about the trust fund, I was thinking about, we really should have a program. We should have an idea of setting money aside, or at least, making it known that money's available for certain kinds of activities. And, one of the things that I thought is that we should always maintain a certain balance in there. We've got 214,000. And one of the good things I thought about the fund is that it would allow the town, everybody to move more quickly, to tie down an asset when it came to market. If we don't have the funds available, then there's no way for us to bid on a building or land that is for sale, because it would take us 2 years to get the money. Is there a way, and is there a need, you know, to set aside and say, we're gonna maintain at least 100,000 or 150, always in the trust fund, just so that it's available for emergency opportunities?
That's really a policy, right?
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
I will say this.
Yeah.
Those policies are good ideas, but they're also, you know, they may present itself, and you may go through that same thing and say,
Yeah.
hey, I have an opportunity to tie up this piece of property, I think it's a really good investment, but if we're gonna fall below the 150 we just set as our minimum threshold, they're gonna do it?
Well,
I mean,
the
I'm dealing with that
150 is
case
to
right
take
now.
advantage of that opportunity.
but I'm saying,
think-
I think it's good to have a guideline, but you do wanna have that conversation. Nina wanted to.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think we talked about this, and I think that one of the things that we saw as, you know, a roadblock, if you will, also was the fact that where is the oversight, right? Like where, if we decide that we are going to, like, with the money, like where is the oversight, and who gets to decide what it is that we are going to purchase or not purchase? And I don't know. I just feel like it
Actually,
becomes more of a burden. I mean,
we do
I would
have-
love it. I would love for us to be able to say, like, here's a property, let's buy it, the end, and then we can build affordable housing there, right? Without any of these other caveats that go into it. Give it to, you know, what are the people who are building Habitat for Humanity, right? Give them the land and they build something on it, and we do good. But I think it just comes with like a lot of strings and things attached if we have that. I don't know. You guys can correct me if I'm
No,
wrong.
I will say, there are, you know, we work in public sector, so there's plenty of checks and balances here, but, you know, for example, even to deploy the housing trust fund, you make a recommendation, or I make a recommendation to you, and then that's subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. Then we have to report ultimately, you know, what we've done to the RTM, so there is some oversight there. But in addition, even to acquire, I think what I've said before, the town is not, not well suited to do development work itself, because, you know, every time we sell, acquire, or lease property, it requires a minimum of 3 different boards to review and approve that, and that takes time. You know, even working very efficiently, that typically will take me, you know, at least 2 to 3 months to secure those approvals. And those approvals are the Board of Selectmen, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the RTM. Those are required in order to dispose of or acquire property. So it's not, we're not a very nimble actor. So that's why I think, you know, we should look for opportunities to partner with others that maybe do development for a living. as opposed to us
I think that was the thing that I remember. It was the whole getting through RTM, which almost never agrees on anything. So I think that that's one of the biggest obstacles.
But using the trust fund dollars, it's only us and the Board of Selectmen.
Right, and I do think, you know, it would be helpful, and I think we do need to have a conversation and figure out, and I don't think it needs to be a hard, fast rule, but we should set some guidelines as to how we want to deploy the Housing Trust Fund to have the most bang for a buck. We should take into account other resources that are at our disposal, what we can use the Housing Trust Fund money for versus these other pots that are out there. I've used the Community Development Block Grant to do these acquisitions, but I can't use CDBG dollars for new housing construction. I can use Housing Trust Fund dollars for a lot of different things. So it's, we should look at that and figure out where we can have the most impact and what developers need, and then I think we should set some guidelines. And then we'll have to figure out, again, you know, what are the limits? I mean, what's our minimal expectation? If we need to have a 40-year restriction because we want housing unit equivalency points? You know, how much is investment are we willing to make to get that? You know, it's been a little bit of a, you know, the CDBG example was just a little bit of a negotiation. We finally got to, well, I'll do $25K. It was less than what he wanted, but he was willing to do $25K per unit, which I thought was a very good investment for the town. So we may have to have a different standard for housing, but I think that conversation is well worth having.
So one idea I had is that we should be buying condos in town when they come up, because they're already there, you know, we're not increasing density. And so if we had a program, maybe we would work with the housing authority or someone like that, and that every 2-bedroom condo that comes up that's under $400,000, try to buy. And that the housing authority would run it as affordable housing for perpetuity, you know, more than 40 years.
That sounds like a good idea, but like how many are up for sale for under 400,000 around here nowadays?
Not a lot, but every once in a while they pop up, and you got to move quickly. I'll send a list of the co-ops in town that are for sale currently. You guys can look at. Because one of the things I think the town really does need is starter housing. You know, the single-family homes that families can afford, 2 to 4s, you know, that people can afford, and they're getting bought up and turned into McMansions, or you get 3 together and you can do 40 units, right? Something like that. So. And Mark, have you thought broadly about what to do with the fund? You know, that when we talked about it for a number of years, then we got it, and we got a bunch of money. Most of it is down at Quincy. But are there other opportunities that have come by that you thought, gee, if I just had $1.5 million, we could really do something?
Well, I think, you know, we had that conversation with members of the RTM, and it's funny because they're like, well, we'd rather you, instead of buying these, you just buy 130 Beach Road for $1.5 million. And my question was, into what? Because if you're putting $1.5 million into that, what do you have to do in terms of development to make the numbers work? And so, so even with Greenfield Street, we ran into a situation where we're buying, you know, basically doing something that would be completely contextual with the neighborhood, doing two-family units there, which I thought was very modest. And the only way we could do it is by basically subsidizing the crap out of it and having somebody like Habitat to do it. And, we had people that were pushing back with that. That was like too much development. So I'm not sure the town is well equipped to like do a big development deal. I mean, Carroll or somebody like that may have a thicker skin, and maybe, you know, that's what Darien did. So they, Darien and O'Keene, and when they set up their housing trust,
Okay,
they basically had a project in mind. They just needed a money to give to the housing authority to do it. I don't know what they've done since then, but, they had that project.
mhm.
And so similarly, we had, you know, a problem we didn't know how to solve here because there was no ability to get outside federal or state financing, given the limitations of the site. So we've invested here. I think, you know, long-term, preserve and enhance affordable housing here is a great investment, but yeah, I think there'll be other things that'll pop up. We'll just have to see, but I do think we should set some guidelines, because we really are kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit.
Mhm.
And that, I guess that's to be expected initially, because you don't know what you don't know, and just have to see and kind of works itself out, but it does give me a little,
I'll do a search. We're not the first community that set guidelines.
no, there isn't. And we had some information. I think what we got sidetracked on last time was creating an application
Yeah.
process and an application.
Yeah.
That's the easy part.
Mhm.
The hard part is, you know, setting up some guidelines to figure out where you want to invest and what's going to have the most bang for the buck, and coming to agreement on that.
Yeah,
And that, you're going to have to be flexible. I think you may set this guideline, and then something will pop up, and you say, well, we want to do this instead, so we need to be flexible.
and I don't think that we can set the guidelines ourselves, and we might propose them, but I do think other people should have a say in that. First Selectwoman, maybe folks at the RTM, you know, we're gonna set real guidelines. I don't think that it should be just us.
To that point, maybe, you know, and we didn't really do that, but, maybe we need to do a little bit more listening and talking to development partners and saying, what do you need? You know, to your point, if we had $1 million, where would you deploy that? What would have and what are we what's our objective? Our objective is to get moratorium points. What will give us the most yield on
No, that's not our.
one of our objectives?
One of our objectives, yes, yeah.
Well, and on the second thing, which is to broaden our housing opportunities, what are we talking about? We really have a preference to do, you know, small 2 to 4 unit development, like we're talking about at Greenfield Street, or we want to invest something else. So, I mean, there's a lot. Maybe we should be having some initial, you know, talking to people, and then using that by all means, we have to look at what other communities have done, but it may be very specific to our needs here.
And when you say talking to people, you're talking about talking to developers or
Yeah, I think so.
land use attorneys or?
Yeah,
And I think it's good to be talking to the Board of Selectmen, for instance, because we grease the skids if we're all of similar mind in terms of what our priorities are, right? In
Yeah.
terms of you trying to get these approved,
Yeah,
right?
well, what if we talk to a bunch of, you know, people in the development community, whether they're land use attorneys or developers or people that finance these projects, get that research together and look at what other communities have done, and then have a public meeting where we're inviting people to provide comments on that. And, you know, just a thought in terms of the process, maybe we should be more open about, and deliberative, not rush to something quickly, just come up with a couple ideas, see how people react to them. I think that's maybe some other people have some great. I think then when you're going to the Board of Selectmen, you could say, hey, we went through this
Yeah.
lengthy process, we talked to these different people, we got all this input, and as a result, this is what we're recommending as our plan.
went through a process. Not a lengthy process.
Well, a process, yeah.
And in our lifetime would be good, so. Okay. That's it. So, any new business? Any new non-housing developments in town that are gonna add to the trust fund?
Yes, there's some, I've been waiting for a couple of, bigger projects, the dorms, residential dormitories at both universities, which I haven't seen them hit yet, but when they do, it'll be a pretty big.
Has anybody approached you about the Chase Bank branch in Greenfield Hill? I forget the street it's on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a question.
A lot of different things.
good development site for housing.
I don't know.
Yes, Nina?
Do the dormitory, it's a dumb question. Do the dormitories, like the dorm, do they count as housing against our total housing units in
No,
Fairfield?
they don't.
Okay,
They don't,
Okay.
but they do contribute,
Yeah.
towards our housing trust
Yeah.
fund.
Oh, and
So we
why,
like them.
okay,
We like them.
why wouldn't they
okay,
count?
all right. Because I was
They
like,
have to
wait,
be
are we
able, right?
adding more
They're considered-
housing that doesn't count towards anything? Okay, thank you.
They're, restrictive use. It's not.
Because they're already deed restricted.
Yeah. To my knowledge, they did not.
Yeah,
I don't believe they do.
You think it'd be nice if they could consider to be affordable?
yeah, because they are, well, no, maybe.
No, they're not really. Looking at college right now, no, they're not
more
affordable at all.
expensive. More expensive.
Your daughter's that old?
Well, she has another year.
Wow.
She's entering her senior year, but we're starting that process.
Oh, yeah.
now, so.
Summer for,
Scary.
yeah.
Is your older daughter?
Well, now we're paying for it. It's lots of aid.
Okay. That's it. Nothing more, anything more?
A good discussion.
Yeah,
Good discussion. So, I did want to ask, is Ben, how long is Ben going to be with you?
Through early August. I think what he's been focused on housing, so he started, and I have to circle back with him, I asked him to help put together a preliminary, moratorium application based on sample I provided. And I said, you don't have to have all the information, just put it in the right order and make sure we have the restrictive covenants that go with it. And so I needed to review that with him. That was like a final work product, and then he's been working on the. But he's very excited about the subject matter, so.
Good.
So,
What's his last name?
Sciatti.
He's a local boy, right?
Both of them,
to spell
grew up in Fairfield, and, one, Joe is attending, Notre Dame.
Yeah, I
And,
haven't met them.
Ben is attending University of Miami.
We should really have that meeting with him.
I think,
Sooner rather
maybe
than
we can
later.
do it
Yeah.
Friday even,
This coming Friday?
Yeah.
Let me see.
around, or guys around.
I can make that work.
Yeah, I've got a 9 AM, but anytime after 10,
Okay.
you know. Okay, we're good?
excellent.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Nina. And
Hope
who
you're
else is
home.
out there? Somebody else, right?
Yes, I did finally make it home. The train ride was a little rough, but I am home. Thank you,
All right.
guys. I'm sorry I
Thank you.
couldn't make it today.
No, totally fine. Thank
See you
you.
next time.
Take care
All
now.
right.
Oh,
Bye. Oh, do we have to do a motion thing or no? We can just, I can hang up?
I guess we're
Oh,
adjourned.
no,
Motion
yeah.
no
adjourned.
motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
We'll just stay in session. We're in session.
All
All
right,
right,
good night.
thank you.